to the topic of discussion. And from our favorite, next to favorite woman, Claire Booth Lewis is our favorite, but our second favorite is Margaret Thatcher. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 quotes here to start this off. This is Margaret Thatcher. Look at a day when you are supremely satisfied at the end. It's not a day when you lounge around doing nothing. It's when you've had everything to do and you've done it. Okay, second, what is success? I think it is a mixture of having a flair for the thing you are doing, knowing that it is not enough, that you have got to have hard work and a good sense of purpose. That's success. And then finally, with no offense to the gentleman, it may be the cock that crows, but it's the hen that lays the eggs. Ladies? All right, businesswoman, entrepreneurs. An entrepreneur is defined as a person who organizes and manages any enterprise, especially a business, usually with considerable initiative and risk. I think we have a room full of potential entrepreneurs here today, and we have 3 outstanding speakers to talk about their successful business experience. What I'll do is introduce all 3 of you right at the front. Step aside here. Each, I'll ask you to speak for 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. First up will be Amanda Owens, founder of Future Female Leaders. Amanda began Future Female Leaders in her apartment during her senior year when she was studying accounting and business at East Carolina University. And she used a paycheck from her part-time job when she was a student to get started with it. She was born and raised in Richmond, Virginia, and came from an entrepreneurial family. Amanda says she has always been passionate about small business and its role in America's economy, and she spends her days getting young women engaged in current events and the political sphere and policy discussions, paving the way for those young women to be future female leaders. Amanda describes Future Female Leaders as a social movement for young conservative women that reaches young people and young women, helping them see the reality on key issues and not the gimmicks that liberals have crafted so strategically. Second, we will hear from Andrea Ridgell, who started working in a hair salon at the age of 15, went on to study cosmetology at schools around the world, and at the age of 26, was able to open Mishay Salon and Spa, which is, Saloon, yeah. It's just up the road here in Santa Barbara. And she has built Mishay into one of the premier salons in Southern California. 2 years after the birth of her second child, Andrea and her husband Nathan crafted and launched Glop and Glam hair products, a healthy, natural hair product which has grown since into a multinational brand, a leader in children's hair care market, something that's less harsh for little heads than most adult products. And she's traveled all over the world, styling for celebrities, fashion shows for Vogue, Oscar de la Renta, and more. She's heading out to a show right after this. Her success has allowed her to focus some time on inspiring young women like you to discover and achieve their career goals. Andrea says her life as an entrepreneur and business owner is rooted in her life as a mother of 2 beautiful boys, the oldest is 10, and is continuously inspired by the love of her family. And then third will be Michele Weslander Quaid, who when I first met her was Google's chief technology officer, and she also has Santa Barbara roots, right? She started her career as an image scientist and a systems engineer after receiving her degree in physics and engineering science from Seattle Pacific University, and then she went on and got a master's in optics from the University of Rochester. After 9/11, she was recruited into the federal government and led a cultural and technical integration of the national security community, serving in a number of key leadership positions. You worked with a bunch of spies, didn't you? And
confirm or deny that.
She said, I cannot confirm or deny that. She really knows STEM. You know that term STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I've usually heard that term used when it discusses a way to improve the competitiveness of our schools in science and technology. And conservative women need to know more about technology. She's now co-founder and president of Global Nexus Alliance, a nonprofit humanitarian organization, and Sunesis Nexus, an independent consulting company. I know you're going to learn a lot from these ladies about business, and so why don't we just begin, Amanda? 10 minutes? You want to sit or stand?
I'm right here if that's
Okay,
works.
terrific. Thank you.
So I was going to just talk a little bit about my story and how I created Future Female Leaders. I grew up in a very, educated household. They always were pushing American history. I fell in love with American history. I loved reading. I was the #1 reader in the whole 4th grade of my elementary school. I think I read 75 books that year, and it was so awesome. That's where it started my competitiveness. I wanted to be the best that I could be, and it was awesome to see my name right next to that #1. And so that kind of started the fire. And I went in high school, and I was still informed, but not really involved in the political process. But I did have very strong discussions with my family around the dinner table. They were identified as conservatives, but they never pushed their beliefs on me. But they did instill, entrepreneurial skills and beliefs and building your own version of the American dream. I know a lot of the liberal women will tell you that conservatives hate women, and that's not true. I think that it promotes the most independence and giving your own ability without the government's help to be the best that you can be. And so we had these discussions, and me and my dad would go back and forth and say the presidents in chronological order. And so anyway, I went to college, and I found myself, I realized that not everyone was raised with those same principles of hard work, personal accountability, and responsibility. And I found that a lot of people don't keep up with the news. They live under rocks sometimes. And so I didn't really have anyone to talk to about that. I'd call, my dad, and we'd talk about some stuff. So I found myself missing that discussion around my dinner table. And so I kind of wanted an outlet to be able to say what I want. And I was still at an age where I worried about how many Facebook friends I had, so I didn't want to go off and spout out on my Facebook and lose my Facebook friends, because what a tragedy. And so I created, on a July night, I was actually home for the summer, and I created a Twitter account called FFL, and I didn't create it to be a social movement of any kind. I created it kind of just as my sounding board. It just felt so good to get out how I felt about issues, even if no one listened. It just felt like that release of being able to speak my mind. And with that, I talked about politics, the current administration, what was going on in the world, pop culture, and also the very personal events of my own life. Maybe it's the occasional, the boy takes, forever to text me back. So something is very trivial and very lighthearted. And I think that mixed with current events and politics really started resonating with a lot of girls that felt like they were alone on college campuses. So the account started gaining a substantial following. And I felt like there was kind of a rallying cry to be the kind of leader for that niche of conservative women. So I found myself, I wanted something to unite that group. So again, I took my paycheck from my part-time job as a student, and I went and I bought some merchandise, like the ones you saw over there. And that was to kind of create that sense of pride of what it is to be a conservative woman. And if you have an elephant on you, and be proud of, America, and to start the conversation. You don't know how many times I've been wearing, one of those items, and it starts the conversation because it's presented in a different way that no one had really seen before. So that was kind of my first start in getting people excited and giving someone a sense of support and unity, for conservative women. And from that, they wanted more, and they wanted kind of a platform where we could inform girls on the policy issues without, the media and the liberal bias. So we started creating a blog And we have a very robust blog with about 3 to 5 postings a day. And it's presenting policy, what it's like to be a Republican or a conservative on campus, very lighthearted, very easily digestible content where girls can find it relatable to their own lives. And so we think that that's very important because I found that women want to see themselves in the political sphere and how these policies are relevant to them. So we kind of create an easy way to get engaged in the political process. So I graduated college and I came home, and now I wake up every morning and I can truly say I get to do what I love. And it hasn't been easy. It's been very hard, and I've learned a lot of lessons along the way. I think I've learned more about myself in the past 3 years than I did for the whole time leading up to that. And if there's a few things I can tell you, don't let being no define you, being told no define you. I have been told so many no's in my life, but I will tell you it has only made me push harder and be a better person and to be the best that I can be. And those no's have always led me to a better yes down the road. And it sounds so cliche, but keep pressing on even when you're told no, and don't get down and don't let it define you. You can be upset, but learn from it. And another thing is just being adaptable. If there's one thing about an entrepreneur, it's plan A usually never works out. Neither B, C, D, or E. So being able to pivot and not get down and be able to pivot to the next plan of attack without a loss of enthusiasm, and that's hard. So that has been a learning process for me. And just be proud of who you are and be fearless, and get involved with things that make you excited and passionate, because that's where you're going to do your best, is something that you're passionate about and wanting to get involved with. So I think that's so awesome that you guys are here. This is great. I was just saying, I've said to so many people that I've talked to here, is I wish I had like these types of things and I had known about it. And so, I think that this is a great thing that Claire Booth, a special thank you to them for putting this on and having me on here. And it's been great to speak with you guys.
What a great story. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Andrea started at 15. Let's hear it.
Thank you guys so much. I'm excited to be able to speak to all of you successful, strong women. So I started in the hair business when I was 15 years old. I feel like I'm very blessed that I had parents that, even though they had all gone the traditional route and had gone to college, I said, okay, I want to work in a hair salon, and they said, try it, see if you like it. Pretty much once I got in a salon, you couldn't get me out. I was staying late, and I went to hair shows, and there was hair to the ceiling, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. So I knew that that was going to be my path, and I got my hair license when I was 18, and I built a pretty strong clientele pretty much out of the gates. I went to all the local sororities, and I spoke with all of them about giving them discounts if they came to get their hair done. I went to the high schools and gave the teachers all discounts, and really used as much as I could leverage to build a clientele and take it like a real serious job and career move. I opened my salon when I was 25, and I had also a brand new baby. He was 6 months old at the time. It was a little bit crazy having a brand new baby and a new business, but I decided that that was the right time for me to do it. I was training a lot of girls and teaching them how to build clienteles and get their careers established as well. And so I realized that owning my own salon was an important thing for me to do. And the number one reason I opened my own salon really was to create a environment of I really wanted a healthy environment for all of us. I have currently all women, but all of us to really feel like a family, a community. I wanted my clients to feel like that. I wanted to take care of all of their clients. I wanted them to take care of mine. And I really wanted them to trust me. That was really important to me. And I feel, so I'm proud to say we've been open 10 years now. and I've had 0 turnover from my hairstylist, which is really a big deal, especially in our industry. And we really are, we have like a sisterhood. We have, I mean, obviously you have to have that head person, and I definitely feel like that, but I wouldn't be where I am in the success of my salon without those women. And I have to say, it's funny, I travel around teaching hair courses all over the country, and when I was getting ready to talk to you guys, I thought about it. I always teach them that they have to build a foundation to do an updo. So you have to have that foundation to stick all the bobby pins in. Otherwise, by the end of the day, the hair is going to fall down. And I was thinking about my salon, and I thought, you know, I have that foundation. I built that foundation for the business to be able to grow. I literally handpicked every girl that I have there. And my husband at the time was not the time, my same husband, but my husband at the time when we opened our salon would say, you know, you just need to get some more people, you know, and I said, no, I need the exact right fit. I need the right team. I need the right people that are going to support my business. And I'm so glad I did, because that's where I got the success of my salon, and that foundation, and those wonderful women, and each and every one of them are amazing and talented and successful and strong, and I love to be able to go to work every day with them. I mean, I'm so passionate about my job, and so to be able to have other women that are around me is just inspiring. It's really great. And so after I had my second child, I decided to open another business, because I'm crazy, and I don't know why I decided no more kids, because I don't need any more businesses. So my husband and I set out to start. I knew there was a void in the market for hair products for children. And I noticed I would get clients constantly saying, you know, what do I use on my kids that's natural but that works, and, you know, all the different things. And when I had children of my own, I really realized there really wasn't a lot out there. There wasn't anything that combined, you know, natural and organic, but also fun, and wanting the kids something that the kids would want to use, but also as a hairstylist, something that was quality product. So my husband and I looked into it, and we decided to start it. And we started Glop and Glam hair products, and it's been amazing. I mean, it's really grown. It's been really hard. I have to say to you guys, I had never been on the manufacturing side of things, so I had always been the hairstylist, the creative one. So to come up with packaging and the products, that was really fun. But I thought, you know, I'm going to go to market, and there's a huge void, so it's going to be, you know, great and easy and fast. Well, I think one thing I didn't realize is being in the beauty industry is it's very male dominated. And so for me to go sit there as a young, I mean, at the time, I think I was 29, and I would go in and have these meetings, and they kind of look at me like, we own this, and if you want this piece of the market, you need to work for it, you know? And I have to say, I think exactly what she was saying is, you know, really just being persistent and saying, this is what I believe in, and I know that there's room for this in the market, and I don't care that you look at me like I'm a young woman. I am here to tell you that there is a need for this, and you guys may think I'm just a hairstylist salon owner, but I'm going to keep pushing. And we've continued to push, and now we've really made our place, and now we have people that, you know, are copying us and competing with us, and that's actually exciting to me, because that means that we've really made our market come through. We're in salons and, you know, chains and hotels all over the country, and we've recently started doing events for young women. They're not young women, they're kids, actually, from 6 to like 13, so I guess that could be young women, but where we teach mother and daughters how to style their hair, how to take care of their hair, what products do they use for the different hair types. And as much as, you know, we can all say, oh, it doesn't really matter about the outside, it's only inside, and I agree, except for I think confidence for a woman is so important, and especially for a young woman, to be able to know how to take care of themselves and feel confident when they walk into a room, and when they get to your guys' age where they can go, I know how to go into an interview, I know how to speak to people because I have curly hair and I love it, or I have straight hair and I feel good about how I take care of it. And I think just the confidence level and the emails we've gotten across the country when we've been doing these events, it's been awesome from, the moms just saying, oh my gosh, my daughter wakes up in the morning and she wants to use the products and she knows how to take care of her hair and she knows how to do the fun braids and all of that stuff. And that's inspiring to me. That's really what I feel like, combining the natural element of the product so that mom wants to use it, but also the fun factor. So all of our products, they spell like cake batter and creamsicle and candy apple so that it's got that fun, catchy kind of a thing, but at the same time, it's all natural. So it's been really fun to see that, the growth of the company. And, I have to say too, my dad, he always told me, and he passed away a few years ago, and he always told me, never do anything that you can't handle the worst case scenario out of. And I have to say, the grinding and all the things that comes along with being an entrepreneur and really fighting for what you want, I have to say, I always have to look, though, and say I will never sacrifice all of my success and all of the stuff that I've done and all the things that I've accomplished. I would give up for my children, for my husband, for my family. And I really have to say that that's really where I have to remind myself, even though, yes, these things are great and they're fun, I think my foundation has to be my family, my faith, my, who I am, what I've kind of set to do, not to give any of that up for the fact that, these are great things. But I think that's just keeping things in perspective. So thank you guys all so much, too.
That's great. And she's got some really neat, famous clients in Santa Barbara, too.
Yes, yeah. Dr. Laura is one of my clients, so she was saying that because she was, she's one of my clients, and she's also an investor in Glop and Glam as well, so.
All right, Michelle.
So similar to our early morning speaker, Ying Ma, I'm an American dream story. Grew up as only child of a single mom who didn't have a college education, but through a lot of hard work and education, been able to change my stars, which is wonderful because you can do that in America. So I did grow up here, and I've moved and lived different places around the country. And despite my circumstances that I grew up in, I had a lot. I was very fortunate to have mentors and teachers who looked past that, who saw the potential and encouraged me. So having no one technical in my family, but being someone very fascinated with space and hoping to travel there someday, I decided to go in. I was encouraged by my physics teacher in high school, started in physics, and then all of my study buddies were electrical engineers. So being a glutton for punishment, I added on a double major in physics and engineering science and graduated with honors in 4 years. And then decided, what do I want to do after that? And optics seemed up and coming, and at the time, people looked at you and went, optics? Well, I guess we need more people to make eyeglasses. Now, you all laugh because you know better of all the amazing things you can do with optics. So I went on to grad school, and I kept thinking I applied for the astronaut program and then soon found out if you weren't a fighter pilot or a PhD, you weren't going to make it in. But then I got recruited into America's other space program, National Security Space. And that's how I ended up spending over 20 years in the national security community, still carry a clearance, still work in that business, but have moved on and into other things. So just seeing, we talked about integrity and character, and I had an opportunity as an engineer, and I joked that I had great job security because being an engineer with communication and social skills is a bonus because, a lot of engineers don't have that. And so I had an opportunity to really expand my influence, starting out as a system engineer, but seeing things that needed to be done and kind of branching out. I branched out into IT. I also became a trusted advisor to very senior leadership, as some of the other speakers have talked about, as being someone of integrity, someone who's going to tell you exactly like they see it, and being there and being the assistant to help out the senior leader. It is lonely at the top, and I have been close friends with some very, 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 very senior government officials. And knowing that they knew that they could call me and say, what do you think? And that I cared about their success and I cared about the mission, gave me amazing opportunities to have a positive influence, but even from the background. And so post 9/11, I was one of those people who was, an innovator and proposing new things, crazy things like collaborative environments where we could do information sharing in real time. And this was back in the, in the late 90s, and the web was still kind of new, and the intelligence community is very siloed. And they didn't communicate with each other, as you know, because we failed to connect the dots with 9/11. And so all of a sudden, people who were branded heretics like me became very much of interest by the senior leadership of what were those things you were talking about and those capabilities, because we failed and we need to think differently. And so they said, would you come into the government and help lead this change and innovation? But I have to tell you, before that wasn't an easy ride. I was threatened with my job. I was threatened with my clearances if I literally, quote, dared to breathe the word collaboration. And this was post 9/11. And so I had some really low points, but I believed in what I was doing. I believed it needed to be done, that I was a voice for people who didn't have a seat at the table but were in harm's way. And having the courage of my convictions, from going to nearly losing my job entirely to being asked by the man who's now our Director of National Intelligence to come into the government and help him lead change when he was the Director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. And so the day before my 33rd birthday, and not many people know this, I was standing on the beach in San Diego because I was on travel, facing the flag of the Hotel de Coronado, being sworn in as a senior executive, which is a general and flag officer equivalent in the military. And so I was very young to serve at that level. But I tell you, you're never too young to lead. And you look at history, whether it's, in history throughout, the biblical times, or even in our nation, there was people who were young, but they had the leadership skills the country needed at the time, and they had that opportunity. So I came in and got to serve also as a technologist who had been in the front lines. I've been to Iraq, I've been to Afghanistan, I've been boots on the ground. I saw what needed to be done, and as a technologist, saw the art of the possible, figured out what the operators needed, and then went back and did it. And so when I was recruited into government, when our Director of National Intelligence stood up, and I was asked to be the Deputy Chief Information Officer for the intelligence community. And then the Director of National Security Agency and National Geospatial Intelligence Agency essentially nominated me to go do that, and they said, you're a technologist, you know the problems, now you can go fix them. And so serving as a technologist in a policy role was critical, because I understood what we needed to do, change the rules by which the community played. And so that was a wonderful opportunity as well. And I got to serve in various places around the government. And at some point, amazingly, despite the tragedy of 9/11, the bureaucracies kind of grew up, people got complacent, and I thought, you know what, if we're going to save the world, it's not going to be from government, it's going to be back in industry. And I was thinking about, I want to work with a really innovative group of people, and then I decided to go to Google. And it was funny, people who only knew me as a senior executive, they went, go to Google. Wow, that must have been a real culture shock for you from government. And I said, no, going into government was a real culture shock. I said, you think it's hard to be an innovator? Try being an innovator in government. I mean, there's just so clinging to the status quo. And there's really a cycle that if you're a change agent, first they attack what you're doing, then they attack you professionally, and then they attack you personally. And I've been through that cycle more times than I can count or care to recall, but you build a thick skin and you remind yourself again is what matters. And I would tell my team, because we were leading change, and of course the purveyors of the status quo were threatened by this, is I said, remember, they're threatening you with your job, or they're threatening you with words, and it's not threatening your life. And again, you are representing people who are in harm's way, counting on you to be their voice for what they need. And so attributes, really what I would say is, I love the quote, whatever women do, they must do twice as well to be thought half as good. And then the quote of Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire is, Ginger did everything that Fred did, but backwards and in high heels. So you have to combat the stereotype. How many times have people tell me, you don't look like an engineer? What does an engineer look like? Did you all see the Twitter campaign? I look like an engineer. I had to be a part of that. I thought that was great. But also the opportunity is I saw an ability to see things how they could be and make them so, and not being limited by how they are today, and being decisive, no paralysis through analysis. There's so many people who you have to realize, leaders who they're worried that I don't have all the complete information. If you're a combatant commander in the middle of a war zone, you're not going to have complete information. But you realize that not making a decision is a decision in itself, and it's going to impact people. And so being decisive and always being open to new data coming in and being able to adjust. And so you think about the Reagan principles of faith, family, and freedom. We need more people in technology sector who embrace those type of values. And I want to tell you a story. Speaking at CU Boulder, it was a packed room. It was so illegal by fire standards. I mean, it was people standing in the door, sitting on the floor, in the stairways. And I spoke for about an hour, took Q&A for about 30 minutes. And then at the end, there was one guy sitting there. And he comes up to me afterwards and he goes, why do you support them? And I looked at him. I said, excuse me? he says, why do you support them? And then I started thinking, them. And I thought, oh yeah, there was this article that came out about me being on the board of a conservative technology company. And I said, oh, do you mean the conservatives? And he said, yes. I said, because I'm a constitutional conservative. And he goes, oh, the Constitution is so outdated. And I said, oh, very far from it. I said, the wisdom of our forefathers who knew history and understood tyranny and how to protect our freedom. And if we would uphold it, we would not be experiencing the tyranny we have today. And that man just continued to bombard me with questions. And I had a thoughtful, calm answer. He finally shut down. And I thought it was cognitive dissonance. That, of course, conservatives, they're not smart. They don't know technology, don't understand this. I had spent an hour and a half building my credentials. And then he realized, she's, no kidding, a conservative. She has a brain, she's got credibility. And so that was an interesting story for me. But I would just share some insights quickly with you. I see the biggest barriers to collaboration as culture. Number one is policy and technology. And technology is the easy part. In all my roles, I'm working with senior leaders is saying, if you do not get the culture right and your leadership does not model it, you will not be successful. And then make sure the policy enables the culture you want to see, and then you can bring in the technology. And I would tell you, just as someone who I've had the courage in my convictions, I've had those good days and bad days, and where it seems dark, and then all of a sudden you get this opportunity to serve at a level that you never imagined, is, getting buy-in from the top is golden, but then understanding the middle management you have to convince, and what motivates them. And I was naive to think true blue, they're all for America. Some of these people aren't motivated that way. Got to figure out what motivates them and how what you are offering is going to help them succeed. And the biggest thing is trust your gut instinct. Isn't it true in life that when we ignore that still small voice, that's when you regret the most? Is realizing the political winds will change, but the truth remains the same, and you have to be able to look yourself in the mirror every night. And so that's so important. And embracing risk. I love this quote from Moneyball. The first one through the wall always gets bloody. Every time this happens, the people holding the reins go crazy. It's threatening the way they do business, their livelihood, their jobs, the way they do things. But anyone who's not using your model, they're dinosaurs. And so sometimes if you're the first with a new idea, a new way, it's going to be rough, but in time, nobody ever apologized to me, all the people who threatened me with my job, but we're all friends now, and they see that what we were promoting was what needed to be done. And be purpose-driven for true happiness, not careerism. Don't be driven by the dollars, and do not tolerate a core value mismatch with a boss or a company or an organization. You will be miserable. And have the courage to speak truth to power. And remember, networking is working. Coming to a place like this, like was said today so well, is the relationships. And I tell people, it is not the org chart that gets things done, it's the network. You find the hubs and the connectors, and those are the people who work in and around the business and get things done. And I want to leave you with one quote, Pythagoras, choices are the hinges of destiny. And so that is so important. The choices you make will chart your destiny. And the best way to predict your future is to create it, Abraham Lincoln. So the future is yours to define. Choose well, have the courage of your convictions, stand strong, and change the world.
Thank you. 3 business ladies. I have a lot of questions, but I'm not going to ask them. I'm going to let you ask them. So if you raise your hand, we have the mics here. Here, we'll go here and then here, okay?
Hi, thank you. Thanks for speaking. It was really interesting. I have a question for Michelle. With the proliferation of ISIS and Boko Haram, a lot of people are talking about the role that search engines like Google and social media outlets like Facebook can play and should play in fighting terrorism. Do you have any opinions on that relationship between government and private industries?
Well, if you haven't seen it, Google The Onion, CIA, and Facebook. It is hysterical. And it's all this thing about Mark Zuckerberg being like this clandestine operator for the CIA, and where they used to have to do dead drops and figure out where people were, and now they just post it on Facebook. And it's funny and it's sad, because it was a failure of imagination on the intelligence community's part, right? Silicon Valley figured out how to do this. And they are so afraid in so many ways, fear the technology because of how it could be used against them or in a bad way. And that was a lot of what I fought. I mean, you can't take cell phones into secure information facilities. So we literally, I like a step back in time, and we all have these notebooks because they're afraid that, because they know how to hack cell phones, and they're afraid somebody else might hack a cell phone. And so I really believe in the early days, it was actually in 1999, it was back in the client server days, not web, where there was a bunch of gamers actually at NSA, they played Dungeons and Dragons. And they thought, imagine if we create virtual worlds in the intelligence community. And they worked with an FFRDC, which is essentially, not-for-profit, government kind of lab, crossbreed. And they created a tool they called Collaborative Virtual Workspace, and they put it on the entire national security network. And so when people logged into their computers in the morning, then they logged into the virtual world. And all of a sudden, people doing operations all over the world were making relationships with each other. They were sharing information by putting data in that virtual room. And I came across this with some of my colleagues, and we're like, this is amazing. We got to get this across the intelligence community. Well, again, client server. I had to have their network. We fought 18-month policy battle to extend this network into other facilities within the government. But we got people together where we weren't circumventing processes, but we were getting to know each other's lingo. Imagery technology people dealing with signals intelligence technology people, and I called it was like, your joint duty assignment going to a foreign country and learning a foreign language, but being able to build those relationships. And we were able to prove how to make a national security community really relevant to a tactical fight, because so many times their bureaucracy was just so slow that you couldn't get the data in time. And so we proved back then, 17 years ago, the value of this. And I think we have to approach this risk mitigation instead of risk aversion, is educating people on risk, embracing technology, defaulting to share. And when I said at the DNI and kind of proposed this, they said, how do we connect the dots? How do we get all the analysts collaborating? And they aren't all cleared to the same level, which means there's certain access levels. And I said, well, clear them all to the same level. Well, if you clear them all to the same level, the more people you clear to those levels, the more leaks you're going to have. And I said, well, that's an HR problem. If you hired the wrong person, you hired the wrong person. And so, but if you hired the right person, we can all be trained. I went to Google. What is their philosophy? Default to share. You create a document, you create a presentation, you default to share with google.com so other people can discover your work and build on it. And also from a security perspective, have you noticed there hasn't been leaks like we've seen all over the government, like with OPM and others? They know security. I put that team up against anybody on the planet. And so they can, within an environment, default to share. Their secret sauce is their search engine. It's on the internet. It's not on a special network, but they know how to protect it. And they have checks and balances. And I so believe that we could take that model from industry and lift it and put it into the government if we could clean sheet the architecture and take a fresh approach. And so, yes, absolutely, those kind of tools the fact that we have warfighters going out with millions of dollars of gear and they can't communicate with each other because they're different branches of service. And, instead of just having a basic cell phone to do communication. And so it's outrageous in a lot of ways. But yeah, I firmly believe, and people worry about sources and methods, that's a term there, is if I'm in harm's way, all I want you to tell me is to duck. I don't care how you knew for me to duck, right? And so there's ways to do that. We're making some progress. It's painful. I went back and spoke last month in the intelligence community, and I put up slides from way back when in 9/11 that I had been briefing, and I said, have we changed much from this? Sadly not. It's not fast enough. And so many people said, do we have to have another 9/11 before it happens? I hope not. I hope that we'll continue to make progress.
Thank you. Here?
And I'm working to kind of, change my stars, as you said. But my question is about being a woman, a conservative woman in STEM. Like I'm majoring in neuroscience. Okay. I'm majoring in neuroscience. Right now I work in neurophysiology research. And I've found that, all is well until they find out I'm a conservative. I was presenting research a couple months ago, and I was using a PowerPoint, and I had a Young Americans for Liberty sticker on my laptop because I serve as a state chair. And one person in my lab was like, "You're a conservative?" And I was like, and I didn't even think about it. And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Oh." And it's like been weird since then. And so I was like, for me, it's like not a big deal. Like, I don't care if she's liberal because she's a good person and like we're friends. But I was wondering, like, where is the balance between like being true to yourself but also not coming back to like harm your career, especially like trying to go into STEM like as a conservative woman?
Well, it's funny, I was telling somebody in a sidebar of when I worked for one of the high-tech companies, and somebody was recruited from another high-tech company in, and we were in a meeting, and he was part of the data engine that helped win the last election for the left, and he was like, "We're going to do it for this election for a particular woman who is running," and he was just assumed absolutely everybody in this meeting thought exactly like he did, and I thought, well, he's not an intel officer, but he's like, little did he know that somebody in the audience, who was in this meeting did not, agree with him whatsoever, was kind of horrified that he was being so biased, and we're supposed to be, an unbiased organization. So I think in time, for me, what I've seen is people by example, they notice that you're different, and if you prove your confidence, you're not broadcasting it. They will be curious why you think the way you think, and they will open up a dialogue. And political correctness is the most damaging thing that has happened in this country, because we need the critical dialogue from people with viewpoints of both sides, and we can respect each other and sometimes agree to disagree. But I think that it's been a tactic to shut down that dialogue and use fear and intimidation. And so I would say absolutely, it's also like, in the day where they thought a woman to be successful had to look like a man. Be you. Be truly you. And I think that's very important, not to compromise that. And if you stand on your credentials and your intellect and all, people respect that. I mean, I have close friends we are, diametrically opposed politically in what we view, but we really respect each other. It's possible.
Good. Here, yeah. And then
Hi, thank you all for speaking. This is a question for all of the panelists. I'm wondering what the single biggest challenge for you was when starting your business.
why don't you go first?
I kind of think in college, I started very young. I was 22 when I started FFL. So I think having the confidence. And I was an accounting major, but I had just had those classes, and here I was doing financial statements for my organization. So I think leaning on those and getting advice and seeking counsel from people that do know more about you on the subject, that are willing to give their advice. But I think just having the confidence and knowing that I could do it, and being proud of myself, and finding that within myself to know that I could do it, because there was a lot of people telling me no. And so I think confidence is really what it came down to for me.
Andrea?
I feel like the biggest challenge for me would have been, or has been, probably just how much you have to sacrifice and how hard you have to work. It's all rewarding in different elements, but I think it's kind of one of those things, I don't know that you realize what you're going to have to put in. You can kind of go, oh, I have this great idea, or I'm going to go do this, and think, oh, it's going to happen. And that's not, very few people I know that have very successful businesses have had overnight success without having to work extremely hard and really put everything that they have into it. So I think that, but it's not a bad thing. I think you just have to be prepared that it's going to be, a lot of work, a lot of sacrifice, and a lot of, I think, passion you have to have if you want to do it, because I don't know how you could do it without passion for whatever you're doing.
I think having confidence in yourself as well. It's interesting, and again, it kind of a stereotype is along a lot of men, whether they think they're going to go, I'm going to go be an engineer, right? And a lot of women think maybe it's too hard to go be an engineer. I was one of the only females in my class, and so it was always a challenge. But then I saw so many people doing their own business, and I had so many people say, Michelle, they'd hear me speak or know about my career. Would you come consult with me? And my whole family's blue collar. They all work for somebody else, right? And so when I left industry and went to government, they all freaked out. Like, why would you do that? And when I left government to Google, they all freaked out again. You should change. And then you left Google and you went and started your own company, are you insane? And so it's that having that passion, like she said too, is I want to go do this, and then realizing it is a lot of hard work, that you're kind of, whereas if you work for somebody else, everybody has their different job roles. When you're starting up your own business, it's you. Mm-hmm. You do absolutely everything. But for me, it's been very rewarding because now I have the opportunity to choose how I spend my time and with whom, and really choosing clients that really care about affecting change and wanting that. So absolutely being able to believe in yourself. And I love to say is don't take no from someone who can't give you a yes in the first place. Because people will rain on your parade and tell you, been there, done that, it'll never work. And you have to have the confidence to say, I'm going to give it a go. Because if you aren't risking failure sometime, you risk being irrelevant or not living up to your full potential. And so I looked at it as, am I going to, someday you think lying on your proverbial deathbed and saying, am I going to regret I didn't try something? And you can try and fail and say, at least I did it, I can move on. But then you try and maybe you're successful and you're like, I'm so glad I did. You hear so many stories of people who work for the man their whole life and finally in retirement did what they really wanted to do and they were wildly successful. And you think, wow, what if they had done it 20, 30 years sooner?
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, why don't we go here? 1, 2, 3 in the front. Jess first.
Hi, I guess my question is for Andrea, but I guess you guys can all fill in because I'll make it more broad, but it's more personal for me. I worked in a salon for 2 years, and telling my brother, I did nails, but I was telling my brother that we would watch Shark Tank and we would see the entrepreneurs on there and what they'd have their ideas. And I told him, I was like, there's never been, or there probably, someone might have the same idea, but I was telling him about my hair and just getting Brazilian blowouts. That's kind of chemical for your hair to make it straight, and just telling him I wanted something permanent that to be created. And anyways, so my brother was like, yeah, we were talking about as far as creating that idea, and where do you go to, because you have made your own product, but you had to go to someone to get like scientists to be able to help you create that. And to me, that's why it was like, that's hard. Like, where do you network, and once you have your idea, like, how do you do that networking is my question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, it's funny because I think, again, me not being in the manufacturing side of things beforehand, I didn't realize how much of that is different, I guess. So we have a factory that does, that I have the chemists that I work with, and they actually make the product. And then I have a third one that makes all of our packaging. And then, so everything's made in the United States. So we have the packaging, and then we have a third one that's our fragrance flavor house, and they literally send you a bunch of different fragrances. And so there's a lot of them, and honestly, it's hard to pick which one's right for you. A lot of them has to do with the financial side of it. You can't start at a really big one because they have a really high minimum, and then there's some that are smaller, and they maybe are not going to have as reliable of a chemist or something like that works with. So a lot of that is just, again, though, what the women were saying even earlier is like the networking and finding that community. So even reaching out to someone like me and saying, hey, Andrea, what direction should I go? I'd be happy to help you with any of that. But it's hard because you have to find the right. And it's hard because even though we have a very big factory, they do a lot of the other really big major players that I was talking about earlier that are that have an upper hand over us. They're millions and millions of dollars. So if we have something on the line that's supposed to come next week, they can say to us, well, we have these guys that need to be pulled before you. And that's the hard thing about playing with the big boys, is that we get pulled a lot of times and have to get moved. But we have made our way past the smaller ones, so we're definitely in the bigger of the different warehouses. But absolutely, I can talk to you afterwards too. So, yeah.
Let's get a few more quick questions and answers in, because we're going to have to go pretty soon. Here and then here.
My question is for Michelle. As somebody who wants to go into the intelligence community, and I understand that everything has been so slow because of the growth of the bureaucracy, do you think that intelligence is going to start moving to the private sector now that the bureaucracy is so big and everything's going so slowly?
It's interesting. So my nonprofit, my husband and I, we met in the national security community, went to Iraq to go long before we ever were a couple. It's a great way to date, right? In a war zone. But is looking at so much of when I started my career, the things, we talk about techniques, tactics, and procedures. The technology only existed in the government. Well, that's part of the government's problem now, is technology exists in the commercial sector. I can apply those same TTPs, as we call them, using completely open source commercial data. And a lot of people have gone to doing that. And so the nonprofit that we co-founded together was to take our expertise from the national security community and apply it in the humanitarian sector. Because something I found is, they realize either they're not aware these capabilities exist, or they don't know how to apply them to their mission, or they can't get the funding to do it, or it's a combination of all the above. And that was kind of like the vision of the next mission that we could go do. So you're absolutely right. And that's where I say too about, and I've said to the intelligent leadership, if you don't risk failure sometimes and learn from that and do that risk mitigation, you risk being irrelevant. And I really fear that in a lot of ways they could be, because now people can go do it in the commercial space. And by the way, it does have a big classification label on it that prevents you from sharing it, and reminding them that we don't fight US-only wars. We fight the coalition of the day, and the coalition may change overnight. And you can't just have dedicated systems, boom, all of a sudden you need to collaborate with people, and that's the data you can share because it's open.
Thank you.
This is on. I just had a quick question. Andrea, you touched a little bit about family and the importance of family in your life. So I just wanted to ask all of you, what are some practical ways that you have been able to balance your family lives and your keeping those relationships alive, as well as pursuing those things that you feel passionate about?
Well, I think for me, it's setting a rigid schedule, and I have to be very hard on myself about it, because if I love to be productive and I love what I do, and so I have to physically stop myself from working, and because, I just want to get ahead and get better and be better, and so I've had to really set time for myself and to be able to go and spend with my family, and even have time just to reflect with myself or read a book and do those types of things that also fuel me. So I think that being very disciplined about setting certain schedules and knowing that, a few hours on the weekends that you reserve with your family, because they're so supportive, and with my work as well, they've been supportive, and I think that has helped me kind of balance it, is because I am so close with them and they've been nothing but supportive for me.
I think for me, it's interesting, I think, because of being a mother and from talking to women all day long, I can tell you one of the hardest things to do is being balanced as a mom in general. So usually what gets sacrificed is probably me time. I would rather spend the time, obviously I'm working and I have my businesses, so with my husband and my kids, so I won't go work out, or I won't go on a hike with my girlfriends, or whatever it may be. It's usually me that gets sacrificed, but at the same time, I don't really feel like it's sacrificed, because I love and I'm passionate about my business. I'm passionate about my kids. I'm passionate about my husband. So I feel like you have to pick and choose, but that's part of being a successful woman. I think that's one of those things about being a woman in general too, that we have to try to balance, and it's hard. But yeah.
It was funny. I was sitting with two gentlemen at a business lunch, and one of them says, "Michelle, how do you balance family and career? I always figured you for a career girl." And I turned 39 a few weeks before my daughter was born, so I'm an older mom. But it wasn't a matter of like biological clock, got to get married, have a kid, right? I said before my family, it was all about the career. And I pulled the crazy hours, and I went to the combat zones and all of that. And now I said, my daughter gives me balance. And also in working for myself and having more flexible jobs, my husband is a military officer, and you get in at dark 30 and you're there all day, and then you come home and he's off, right? Versus me, is I work a little in the morning and now I can take her to school, and then I work a little bit in the day and then bring him home and have the dinner time. And it's kind of sacred to put the electronic devices aside, because there's the distracted time with your family versus I know I see you. Quote Avatar, and that where you're really connected, and then going back late at night working some crazy. I noticed the other people when I was at Google with young kids, we were the ones all up till like midnight.
Yeah.
Got the kids to bed, right? Now we're up finishing something up. But having my husband especially understand that is like, honey, my day's like chopped up in little pieces. So you got to understand if you can handle some of this, because I still have some work I got to get done. But it does, when it's right person, right time, have the family, you find the balance.
Mm-hmm. Let me end this panel of these remarkable ladies with a quote. And you know, Claire Booth Luce, in a way, was a business 23 years ago. And I've always liked this quote. It's from Estee Lauder, the founder of the cosmetics firm. She said, "I never dreamed about success. I worked for it." Hard work makes for success. Don't ever forget that. Sometimes there's luck, there's other factors, but it's hard, hard work. You ladies are extraordinary. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing. And now to introduce our last speaker of the afternoon, Anna from Ohio University. Thank you.
Hi again. I'm privileged today to introduce our next speaker, Lisa Daftari. Lisa is an award-winning investigative journalist focusing on foreign affairs with expertise in the Middle East and counterterrorism. She is currently a contributor for Fox News, providing exclusive reporting on vital developments in the region. She makes regular appearances on television and radio, and her commentary and analysis has been featured on CBS, NBC, ABC, The Washington Post, and NPR, to name a few. She also runs the website Foreign Desk News, which provides information on counterterrorism, foreign relations, politics, and policy through daily newsletters. Lisa produced a documentary film about Iranian underground political movements and was invited to show her film to Congress. She is frequently called upon to give briefs and expert testimony for government and private entities. Lisa has worked for a number of think tanks in Washington, where she has written exclusive reports for the Pentagon and other government groups. Before joining Fox, Lisa worked as a producer in an investigative journalistic unit at NBC in Los Angeles, where she helped break the story of a bomb plot which an Islamic prison gang planned to bomb several prominent sites in LA. Lisa holds a master's degree in broadcast journalism from the Annenberg School of Journalism from the University of Southern California, where she received the Presidential Merit Scholarship for her studies. In her last year of graduate school, Lisa was selected as a fellow to the Carnegie and Knight News 21 Investigative Journalism Unit. Lisa completed her undergraduate degree in Middle East Studies, Spanish, and music at Rutgers University with the highest of accolades. Lisa is fluent in Persian and Spanish and an avid opera singer and pianist. Please join me in welcoming Lisa Daftari.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. This is an organization I've become very close with over the last couple of years, and it's only enhanced my experience each time I've interacted with the group and learning from so many of you, young leaders, and the growing challenge that you face with your convictions as you grow into professionals and in your personal lives and on campus as well. So thank you for allowing me to address you this afternoon. And I've prepared a PowerPoint to kind of make it a little bit more interactive, and I look forward to hearing your questions at the end. As this election cycle has underscored more than ever before in our country's recent history, and even more so in the course of your lives probably, it's how different the left and right operate and what issues they deem important, what demographics they target, and how they get their message across. I usually start off by telling any group that I address how I got involved in what I do and how I was ahead of the curve in covering counterterrorism and intelligence work, probably before 9/11. And that's even before I graduated college. It's something that I was very much interested in, but as straight A students often do, I wanted to go to either medical school or law school because I thought that's what you do. And that's what a lot of my family members did, so that was the natural course. And then 9/11 happened, and I was just so struck by it, really just almost paralyzed by it, collecting all sorts of magazines and newspapers and reading and staying up. And I grew up about 7 miles from Ground Zero. And obviously we knew a lot of people, parents of my friends who had died, just going to their regular work day. And I knew that then, or a few months subsequent to those events, that I wanted to spend my career providing context for these types of events, because that's what was missing from the media. No one could really explain what had happened in our country. But the one thing that was very true was that there was no left, right, or center. We were attacked. People stood behind Mayor Giuliani of New York City. People stood behind President Bush, and we were attacked. Fast forward 10 years later or more, and now there was all of a sudden partisanship about the same issue. How are we going to address jihadi militants? What do we call them? What do we call this sick ideology where they want to kill us merely for who we are? How do we even approach this? How do we cover it in the news? And then you stop and think, how could there be two opinions about this? How? And I guess it's all about how these things are presented. Sorry, okay. This is how the left blames the issue on peripheral things, such as unemployment. They also fear that if we go too far on describing this as a war on terror, then we risk having Islamophobia. While the right drives home the overused point that the Obama administration doesn't have a strategy, and that's not a talking point that I'm very fond of. It's a lazy one. The other point is that if terrorists are terrorists, it's not because they're unemployed or undereducated. Because we all know about people who are dropouts, and we all know people who are unemployed. And what do? That's what they do. But strapping bombs to themselves, those are the only bombs they'd be interested in. But in all seriousness, why do these American people have to be presented with two versions of the truth when in fact one only exists? Why do we allow the narrative to be controlled by those who are in office or those who want to be in office when the statistics in so many cases tell a different story? Why? Because the narrative is not being driven by the truth but by political agenda. We are more than ever suffering from partisan politics at a time when global threats are too high of a risk for us to be consumed with a spiteful ping pong back and forth along party lines. And at the end of it, blue cannot convince red, red cannot convince blue, because each party's baseline beliefs are so drastically different. For the far left, we're Americans and, sorry, we just suck. We have no right to criticize anyone else or any other ideology because we're not any better. This nation has adopted an apologist culture in which students like yourselves are no longer, there you go, are no longer going to college to learn how to think, to be open, to have discussions. Let's face it, a college degree, other than getting a specific vocational degree, is a thinking degree. If you go to college to have these discussions, to learn the other sides of the debate, to have and hear other opinions being provided, and that's what's missing. And you have apologist professors who get on their soapboxes to offer their version of reality, one that's dominated by political correctness and anti-American sentiment, void of any nuance. And one in which the students, you guys, are privileged, spoiled oppressors. And who are the victims? Everyone outside of your classrooms. Jihadis, we're no better. We have a gun control problem in this country. Nuclear weapons, how can we not let Iran's oppressive mullahs have them when our ally Israel has them? Women, how can we criticize female genital mutilation and the taking of sex slaves by ISIS when we have failed to give our women reproductive rights? And don't confuse my words. I'm not saying that we don't have room for improvements in this country. On the contrary, that's what makes this country great. We're always looking to improve, to become more free, and to allow more liberty. That is the difference. And let me stop right here. If there's one important message that I send you home with, and if your college professors haven't taken the time to give you this, you are blessed. You're blessed just by the fact that you're living in the best country in the world, and especially as women, you're even more blessed to live in a society that protects us, that allows us to think the way we want, to dress the way that we choose, to hold the opinions that we want, and to go to school to become educated. I know this not just because I'm the daughter of Iranian immigrants, who is cognizant at every moment of every day how blessed I am to work in the career that I work in, to dress the way that I want, to have gone to school to become educated. My mother did have this opportunity in Iran in the 70s. She wore miniskirts and she went to college and she speaks many languages, but those women living in Iran today do not have those opportunities. We watch as parents in Africa grapple with whether to send their young daughters to school for fear that they should be kidnapped or raped by militants. Just this morning, I did a piece on my website on Boko Haram, not only taking these young women into custody. I think, bring back our girls. Remember that hashtag? They still haven't been brought back, many of them. And many other women have been taken into custody by Boko Haram. We're not hearing about Boko Haram because we're hearing about ISIS. There's a major, major problem in Africa. The latest news from this morning, these young girls, as young as 9, are being taught how to become suicide bombers. How traumatic, not only being raped, not only being taken from their families. And these were the more enlightened families. These are the girls that were going to school secretly. They were taken in that way. As women in Iran are called brave when they illegally take off their hijabs in public, only to have acid thrown in their faces. As the women of Saudi Arabia fight to do what? Merely drive. And ISIS dominating the headlines with stories of how they've taken local Yazidi and Kurdish women as sex slaves. These are the realizations we make, and then we question how frivolously the term war on women is thrown around these days to talk about birth control, wage gaps, abortion, discrimination. And while these topics are an important part of societal debate and growth, they certainly are not the issues that shape, define, or currently threaten our country now or in the next decade. More than my cultural perspective into the region is the reporting and research I do every day. Hundreds of real horrific accounts that I can tell you very quickly. Interviewing young Kurdish Peshmerga fighters, hearing young women in Gaza who talk about life under Hamas, interviewing the family of Miriam Ibrahim, the Sudanese woman who was imprisoned just because she's a Christian. I can surely tell you that this is the real war on women. The real war on women is about millions of women throughout the Middle East and the continent of Africa who are forced to go through genital mutilation, now taking place in more than 30 countries. At least 200 million women to this day have been affected. Going back to ISIS, taking girls as young as 9 as sex slaves and child brides, where the horror of young girls forced into marriage is hardly a new idea. More than 700 million women who are alive today were married as children. Listen to this, more than 1 in 3 of those women married before they even turned 15. The real war on women is about the many religious minorities who stand firmly behind their faith as Jews and Christians and Baha'is living in Muslim nations, facing minority taxes, imprisonment, persecution, rape. The real war on women is about intrepid women like Asia Bibi, who I covered, a poor field worker living in Pakistan who had been on death row for almost 5 years. She had touched a bucket of water while working, and they said that bucket of water now became tainted because she was a Christian. The real war on women is about the women of Iran who cannot dress as they want, cannot dance as they want, can't attend schools or get the jobs that they want. They can't even file for divorce from a violent spouse, because if they do so, custody of their children goes to the husband, no questions asked. The real war on women is about Rehana Jabari, a 26-year-old Iranian woman who defended herself against a rapist and then was executed after already serving a 7-year sentence. And yet I can say without a doubt, Rehana was one of the lucky ones. Why? Because she had coverage of her case. Imagine I call her lucky even though she was executed. Why? Because she had a chance. She had a chance to be freed because there was some sort of international spotlight on her case. You can play the video at about 4 minutes and 30 seconds, please. Rehana had so many supporters and advocates around the world. What's your message to those people?
کمک بکنید به من. از همه مردم دنیا میخوام کمک کنن به من.
I need your help. I am asking all the countries in the world who defend human rights and women's rights to investigate Rehana's case in international courts.
بعد از بررسی مشخص بشه که آیا
maybe other courts can prove my daughter's innocence. The government's message to the women of Iran was that you cannot defend yourself in the face of rape or violence, or else you'll be executed.
Now I want to talk about the funeral. Were the proper dignity... So I interviewed her mother twice. Once before she was executed to try to bring more attention to her case. This interview was done less than 48 hours after her daughter was executed. She's numb. She's asking the world to help even review her case to prove her daughter's innocence in the aftermath of her daughter's execution, where she wasn't even notified. She was just told to come take her daughter's dead body. And her words echo in my mind. You cannot defend yourself or else you'll be executed. This is the real war on women. And some might ask, why should Americans care about what goes on in their countries? How about tolerance for other practices and respect for Sharia law and for cultural and religious differences? And just because these injustices go on in other countries, does that give us a free pass to do whatever we want to American women, to deny them rights? We hold ourselves to a different standard. Don't you always hear that? And as much as that may be true, because it is, we don't hear outrage about these cases because it would damage the apologist narrative. The narrative that says we are no better, the one that does not call out global atrocities against women or the real war on women, for fear that these other issues that are now front and center, particularly for your generation, will become less and less important. Because that's the truth of the human condition. You forget about your paper cut when you hear about your friend being in a horrific accident. It's all relative. As young leaders, this is the void that our country is facing and can only be filled by your voices. Live the truth, be confident in your opinions of exposing the real issues our country faces. And as you go to the polls this year, don't let these frivolous distractions sway you, and don't let rebuttals be part of your contribution to the campus dialogue. Reshift the argument to the critical issues and vote for the best foreign policy president, because I assure you, as you just heard, these issues are no longer foreign. And as honest as we can be about the state of world affairs, the safer our nation will be. Just as national security never was and never will be a partisan issue, likewise, the care, concern, and outrage over the plight of our global sisters will never be a partisan issue either. Let's work to set the record straight. Thank you.
We have time for a few questions.
Thank you so much. This is what gets my blood boiling. So I know that this is what I'm passionate about. I'm so glad that you spoke. I just got back from a Model United Nations conference, and I was on the Commission on the Status of Women. And we had 3 topics, and we had to pick one. And I was arguing for us to pick female genital mutilation to tackle that problem and make resolutions to solve that, and everyone else picked sustainable development. Sustainable development. So we spent a week talking about women's involvement in sustainable development when hundreds of millions of women are at risk of female genital mutilation every day. And so I'm wondering, how do we get the left and others who don't think that it's that much of an issue because of cultural reasons to realize that we need to save these women?
Right. It's really the uphill battle that I face daily, and I'm sure many of you have that same frustration of looking at these headlines and thinking, how can we stay quiet? And particularly, it becomes more frustrating in an election cycle, because it's almost like all of the issues that we have with the media, with the on college campuses, or the emphasis or de-emphasis of certain issues becomes underscored in this country. And then we see, like you said, the focus on such frivolous issues. And if you watch any, the Republican debate is mostly on foreign policy. We want to, the questions are focused on what are you going to do about ISIS? What are you going to do? And then if you watch the Democratic debate, a lot of it is about, what are you going to do about about global warming, et cetera. And again, I think the conversation has to come somewhere from the middle. And it's our nation to save. It's for our children, meaning collectively. And it's mind-boggling that, again, like national security is not the main issue going into an election, because if we don't live, it doesn't matter if we get birth control or not. And God forbid there should be another 9/11 to wake people up to that. And I miss that environment, the post-9/11 environment. My family, we weren't, Republicans per se. We're more, I would say, neocon. I think we were moderate, maybe left of center because of just social issues. And when I grew up about 5 miles outside Manhattan. So I think we had that. And then as soon as 9/11 happened, it was just like, okay, open up your eyes. This is exactly what happened, in the Middle East, and it's happening here. And before we know it, and fast forward all these years from 9/11, and we're watching this unfold. And it's not even in slow motion for people who understand these trends. It's really fast. And you're seeing it, in Europe, about how they were so naive. Or look at, the leadership in Germany. Within 3 months, they have buyer's remorse about opening the doors to all of these immigrants. And this is, again, it's not an anti-humanitarian thing to say that we should watch out for the migrant crisis and let them all come in. Muslims died on 9/11. Muslims are dying at the hands of ISIS. And these are always the talking points that I go to bring the left in, meaning this is a problem for everyone. And if you are an innocent refugee trying to get out of Syria, trying to get out of Iraq, you don't want to be blown up in Brussels, and you don't want to be blown up in Paris, because you easily could. No one goes through and sifts. The people who put those planes through on the buildings on 9/11 never said, well, let me make sure that no Muslims go to work that day. And the people who went into the cafes of Paris didn't try to sift out all of the Muslims. So I think for, again, global stability, for everyone's safety, there should be an awareness of this. And the sooner that we in the West, collectively with Europe, with Canada, can understand and really identify these threats, the sooner that we can get on board. Look at some of my favorite people on the map these days. Leadership in Jordan, leadership in Egypt, who are Muslim leaders who are saying, come on, guys, get your act together. And 1.7 billion Muslims on this planet, okay, if 0.001% of them are jihadis, we have a problem, a major one. The Wall Street Journal had a piece out about 3 or 4 days ago that 22 people from the Brussels and Paris attacks are still at large. And, to some people, that's such a small number, 22 people. Okay, but when you think about those people have access to the infrastructures within the localities that they detonated these bombs. So they understand the transportation system within Brussels and Paris. They understand, or they looked into and studied all of the different things that went into planning those attacks. And it only took 4 to 8, possibly 12, but let's say 4 to 8 people to carry out each one of those attacks. So we have a major problem here if we even let one bad apple, as we call them, or bad Skittle. I know there's so many metaphors of this Skittle in the bowl, and would you touch it if one was poisoned? There's a problem here. And the sooner that we can define all of these global problems to be bipartisan issues and not ones that only the Republicans care about because it puts the Obama administration to shame. To go back to why I hate that they have no strategy talking point is because it's a lazy talking point. It's not that they have no strategy. It's a shame that we've come to the place where we have two different strategies about defeating an enemy that threatens us, each one of us.
In many of my foreign policy and national security classes, my professors talk about how you're more likely to die from a
bee sting? Oh, what is it? A bee sting?
No, like a terminal disease or like a gun wound or something like that than you are from a terrorist attack. And it really bothers me because they kind of put the terrorist problem on the back burner as a national security problem for America. And I was just wondering how you would tell us to,
I would dare that professor to bring in some families who lost loved ones on 9/11 and to say the same thing. I mean, it's a shame that they would say such a thing, and to really, there's a small chance of getting hit by a bus before you cross the street, so does that deter anyone from crossing the street? No, it's like, yes, you can say that, but why even say that to diminish the threat that exists? Right? So then it's just like the whole ISIS thing. Okay, there's only 20 to 30,000 ISIS fighters, so they're not really a threat. No, but the problem becomes, it's like, the analogy that I've always used is when you're, shaking out a feathered pillow at the beach, and then you try to go back and collect all of those feathers. Well, they've spread so far, and that's exactly the ISIS crisis that we face, meaning they're on Twitter, they're on YouTube, they're on Facebook, and it's not just that. An issue bigger than ISIS right now is the Iranian regime, because they've given so many weapons, supplies, money, intelligence, and continue to prop up Hezbollah, Hamas in Gaza, Lebanon, and within Hezbollah and other rebels there. Syria, they're the major problem in Syria. Yemen, the Houthi rebels, who's supporting them? So when you look around and how we're connect all the dots on the map, and we just freed up all this money so that they can go on another shopping spree. A global jihadi shopping spree is exactly what's going to happen. So, I mean, the answer to that talking point is A, it's not that they're contained, or that ideology is spreading. And people who live in, their parents' basement, because wherever they are, and are on their laptop, are actively being recruited by an epidemic that's spreading. So you don't need that jihadi to come over to, where are we, Santa Barbara, to, recruit someone face to face, because that's also happening, whether individuals are linking up with them online or they're finding a way to link up with individuals, it's happening. And it's not only happening to people who are, again, coming directly from Syria, look at the guys in Brussels. They were part of that community. They're nationals at this point. They're living there and they were brought up there. So I think that if you look at the numbers, it's not, again, how many people did it take to carry out each one of these attacks? When you look at the numbers, right, in comparison, it's not going to be a big threat. It becomes a big threat when it's too late and the morning after. So on September 12th, it became a big threat. It's unfortunate. Yes.
I'm just curious about your perspective, because you do have experience in the media. What is your experience with bias of opinions and covering certain sides of the story and not the other side? What is your opinion on that, and how do we fix certain problems with bias?
Yeah, I think many years ago, when I first started at Fox, even maybe before that, when I first started writing in general, I noticed one huge problem that the right had and the left was using to their advantage. The left always tells their story through human stories, right? So you watch a piece on 2020, and I remember sitting with my family on a family who didn't have insurance, and they made the case so well for Obamacare that any one of us watching would be like, yes, these people need insurance. It was a tearjerker, right? So they tell this huge, they change policy and they bring to the forefront their agendas or their pitch for something through this very heartwarming, tear-jerking story. And the right never does that. The right is punch, 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 punch. We have a bunch of white men, gray-haired men in suits saying that we need to, close the borders. Like, ooh, how about? And then the left comes in with one Mexican family that deserves to be here. And yes, those stories exist. And I think one of the things that I've definitely tried to do is bring these human stories from the Middle East out and tell their, why is it that, the Iranian regime needs to be stopped because of cases like Rehana and her mother? Why do, the whole Syrian refugee crisis, I interview people who wish they could go back and now are stuck in Greece with no language ability, no vocational experience to get jobs. And, they're better off if we would help create safe zones in their country so they can remain nationals and they can grow in a safe environment at home where they feel more comfortable. So again, I think that's one of the issues. But going back to, I guess, your original question is there like your question is there a hesitancy to cover certain topics and things like that? I think when it comes to the day after, so certainly like the September 12th kind of an example that I gave you, everyone's on board. Everyone wants to have someone on the ground in Brussels, someone on the ground in Paris talking about what happened, getting all the details. When it becomes a matter of analysis 4 or 5 days later, then you see where there's more interest on one side, less interest on the other, again coming back to their political agenda and what it means, right? So if it's bad that the Brussels attack happened and it becomes an anti-refugee case, then the left is probably less likely to want to highlight that.
Hi, Lisa. First, thanks so much for being here. I mean, I know I personally love watching you on Fox News, and thanks for bringing those personal stories, really. So we've seen President Obama come out and apologize for many actions done by the United States. And I guess I'm just wondering, where is that line? And I know, myself personally, and I'm sure many others believe the same thing. I don't necessarily think that it's the right thing to be out and apologizing to countries made by actions, especially past actions by the United States that are really a forefront of making America strong and have made America strong. So how do you think we should combat those, and what's kind of the fine line for combating those issues?
Right, and I think it's never a good idea for a leader of any country to have that kind of stance against other countries, especially when we're in such a vulnerable state ourselves. I think that, you guys know just as well, it's when the United States is the strongest, when we have the strongest leadership, and we're standing here with probably the best example of that. There's a reason, and this is not an endorsement for anyone up here, but there's a reason why there's a popularity behind Donald Trump, because whether it's empty behind, his words are empty or whatever it is, he offers a certain segment of the population this, we're going to get them and we're going to be strong and we're not going to take any BS from our enemies. And the reason for that being so popular is because it's been missing for 8 years. People miss that. And I just find that, when we have an attack in this country, I remember well when we had, who was I'm trying to think, which happened first. There was a beheading of an American, Foley, happened first, yes. James Foley was beheaded by ISIS. And President Obama came to the podium, and the first thing out of his mouth was to say, this is not, this is nothing against the Muslim community, XYZ. The Jordanian pilot was then burned alive. If you remember, that was very shortly thereafter. And the Jordanian king didn't even flinch. He didn't even ask his advisors or anyone. He killed rather everyone that he had in custody that belonged to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Because it became not a matter, and he's a Muslim leader. Not only is he a Muslim leader, he's a Sunni Muslim leader. So he's truly a brother. And I think there was a juxtaposition that was so just stark for me, because I think what President Obama's words was that we don't want to criticize our Muslim brothers. I just remember the Muslim brothers. And the Jordanian king, who was a true brother of the perpetrators, didn't make it a Muslim issue. Why make it one? This was a national issue. One of ours was taken, we're going to take theirs, right? And I think that that's what's unfortunately been lost, is that not to say, when you come out first and say this is not a Muslim issue, it's almost like, it's backwards. It's almost like saying, I am an Islamophobe, so I have to start by apologizing in order to correct it, right? You're overcompensating, right? But why not bring in the Muslim community? Why not go to the mosque and say, listen, Imagine in this room, if there was one bad guy in this room, wouldn't we all want to catch that bad guy? Because we would make us safer. So you go to the mosques and say, look, we're after you and your community's safety, your community's reputation, your community's everything. Help us help you. Put them in charge, empower them, have them lead this, right? And instead, by apologizing over and over again, in my opinion, it's only created a bigger rift over the last decade, even more so over the last 7 or 8 years. So I think that this tone is probably more damaging than anything else. And it continues, like you said, on college campuses, and it's not that big of a deal, and there's not that many bad Muslims, or we have to apologize, it has nothing to do with Islam. It does. Maybe it's a perversion of Islam. Let us vindicate the good Muslims, right? And I think that's a disservice to the Muslim community. And I think, if you look at the Jordanians, how they're doing it, or the Egyptians, how they're doing it, or how the Lebanese want to do it, how the Moroccan leadership is doing it. In Morocco, they have it's right underneath the surface. Saudi Arabia, same thing. Saudi Arabia will throw anyone in jail. I would never praise them for their human rights practices. But at the same time, zero tolerance for terrorism and dissent within their borders. Outside their borders, they're supporting it because they want to combat the Iranians' Shiite growth on the map. Inside their borders, they're not tolerating it. Why? Again, it's a national issue. They're not like, well, there are Muslim brothers. No, none of that. So it's, again, this tone that's causing a lot of damage, and we're seeing it pretty much get worse every day with this.
Just had a question on what you see as Sharia law kind of begins to creep into the United States as we have larger Muslim communities, and what you see is the most effective way to keep that from shifting into our legal system.
Right. Well, okay, there's a few layers of that. I think on the one hand, you have families who bring it over. And that's a shame. You hear about the honor killings, and they're few, but there are cases of honor killings. There's a family in Texas, one in San Diego, I believe. These are cases where the father actually killed the daughters because they had American boyfriends, or they found out that they weren't virgins anymore. These are honor killings within our borders. So they pretty much bring over their practices. I don't think that's as prevalent, but it is there. And the other is creeping into society. Well, some parts of it we can't help, and some parts of it we can. What can't we help is that the lobbies, right? So they are definitely embedding their apologist representatives into government. And again, we have all kinds of interest lobbying in Washington, D.C. So that, again, becomes a matter of awareness and knowledge, and not letting their voice overshadow others. You have CARE, for example. CARE was a very quiet little group. I remember interviewing them in college for a post 9/11 piece that I did. Very quiet. Now they have this entirely huge platform, and they're the first to come out and speak out about anything because this administration has given them that voice and put the spotlight on them. So I think, depending on who takes the White House, in January, I think that there will be hopefully a shift of this narrative where have we created this, you see a lot of more of these characters in Hollywood. You see a lot of, like, 24 is very popular, Homeland is very popular. You see a lot of these characters being written in, because I think they're definitely, this time period has awoken this interest in hearing the other side, right? And I think that's okay, that's fine to a certain extent, as long as there, again, is an awareness about, how far we take that, how far we let these influences go. And also, I think what's very important to bring back, not forced assimilation, but encouraged assimilation. And to say to whether they're migrants or first-generation Americans, it's going to benefit your child to learn English, to be, to come into our society. And I think a lot of these parents, especially from very, very religious Muslim families, they hold their children back. They don't want them to become Hollywoodized. They don't want them to dress a certain way. They don't want their daughters mixing in with, the loose American girls. And that's where you have the they cut their children off from society. They can only interact with, let's say, other Muslim children or children from the mosque. So then they get the opportunity to go to ISIS, where they offer them these beautiful women, and they take the first opportunity. So I think that it's going to take a lot of this, again, school systems, from local communities, working with these families, bringing them in, allowing them a safe place for them to assimilate. I probably have a more cushioned approach than a lot of people left of center to very far right, right of center to the very far right have about these issues. But I do think that if we take a nuanced approach and we have a more inviting approach to that, other than saying, look, we've lost this. They're here, we've lost it, like Europe, it's done. And there is that opinion. That opinion is out there and exists, like, what are we going to do? We can't fight this. They fight with bombs, and we're trying to fight with words. But they live within our communities, and the only thing that we can do is to encourage them to feel a part of this nation rather than an enemy of it. Thank you very much.
And Lisa is one of our newest campus speakers, so if you would like to bring her to your campus, please get in touch with me. A couple of quick announcements. One, I've been getting a lot of check-in reminders from the airlines, so please just go on to whatever airline that you're flying with and use your confirmation number and check in and print out your boarding pass. Second is, in your folders are your feedback forms. Since you've already listened to a number of speakers, you can probably start filling in some of the information, but please make sure to give those back to us tonight after the Stacy Dash dinner. And then third, dinner starts at 7 o'clock, so please get here in time for 7 o'clock dinner tonight. All right, we look forward to seeing you then.